having a free and clear home. It is so important to own property to be able to have a balanced life so that you can live the life that you were called for. Having a free and clear house is what we have. Now we have here in America. And I'll tell you in a second what we paid for it.
Hello and welcome to our Retire Early lifestyle, where we're fixing up an old house without a pile of cash. Update October 2024.
So we're genuine in our videos. We always talk about like things that we're doing or we've done, or we try not to guess around and give you just opinions based on nothing. I'm just going to tell you the top things that are at the front of our daily experience at the moment because of what we're going through, because we're fixing an old house without a pile of cash. And these things are particular to where we are in life. Now, where you are in life, it may apply or it may not apply. And so I have several things, so stick around. I'm going to tell you each one of these things that it's not that I couldn't do them, it's that it would have actually cost a lot more money being abroad, even though these places like, I just say Ecuador a lot because we did spend 8 years there, but it could have been any place or that is being highly promoted. So let's get on with it. Before we went to Ecuador, it was promoted as being cheap, and I was able to outfit a kitchen here for a couple of $100. Like, if in Ecuador, like one appliance was like, on the low end was like $550, and it went up from there. So one appliance was like $550, $650, $750. Here, I've outfitted my whole kitchen for a couple of $100. I mean, I've got a top of the line electronic stove. I could have got one that was a little older with the little knobs on it for $100, but a deal on this came up, and it's electronic. These are $1,200 new, but I got it for like $60. I've got top of the line implements here. I've got a couple of fridges. I didn't get the big fridges, but I've got a couple of fridges. But that's for only a couple of $100. We've got the whole kitchen going. It's not finished by any means, but we're fixing up an old house without a pile of cash. And our videos are slanted towards doing things as a frugal / minimalist way of doing things, because that's what enables us to have the retire early lifestyle without having to have that stressful life that we gave up in our late 20s of trying to make $1 million a year. So that's one thing. It was just really expensive. And I know that when we first got to Ecuador, I used to talk about this. I've made videos saying, yes, when we were in America, we would get things off of Craigslist or whatever, and we would be able to do things, a lot more things, because we realized as soon as we got there how expensive things really are in places like Ecuador. Now, other things are higher here, like the cost of food's higher, but everything seems to work out in the end, which we'll talk about in a different video. So it's not that we couldn't do this in Ecuador, it's just that it would have cost a lot more money. It would have cost well over $1,000, maybe even $1,500 to $2,000 for something that I'm doing for $200 to $300 here in America. And it's not about things. I mean, these are like tools that help you do things. Like this is the top of the line. This is not the cheapy Walmart $70 Instapot. This is the toppest of the line. This is the $150, $200 one. This is the one that does bone broth in 2 hours. It used to be it took 24 hours to do bone broth. The next thing I'm going to tell you is that you never saw us doing sprouts in places like Mexico, Ecuador, just being able to do raw foods or fermented foods, anything that takes clean water to do. So that's another thing that we're doing in America. This is homemade sauerkraut. A lot of people take these kinds of things for granted. Maybe you don't ferment foods, but this is huge. This is part of the retire early lifestyle, is to be able to take care of our health and not rely on institutional health care. Boy, what a revelation it has been ever since 2020 for people that have become dependent on institutional health care. What a surprise they got in 2020. Well, we never got that surprise. We never became reliant on institutional health care, and we don't use it to this day. To this day, we rely on taking care of our own health, and part of that picture is doing fermented foods, and that's something we totally had to quit doing when we were in any Latin American country, and it doesn't matter where we were, and I mean even Panama, Mexico, Ecuador, all of those countries, we could not do it. And I know that people they won't be able to wrap their mind around this, because when you've been somewhere and you know what you're really dealing with, as opposed to still being on the other side and trying to figure how things are based on what your experience is now, it just doesn't work out. Most people won't be able to wrap their heads around, and I'm not going to go into detail on it. But basically, we had cut all this off, and all we could do is eat. All we could eat was cooked food all the time, which for us, which we were gardeners before we left America, and always had fresh food right straight from the garden, that was a huge change in our health. And I've made videos about how my health actually went downhill after we moved abroad. And that's another one of the things. I'm able to have better health in America. This may sound really strange to people, but it's something that you don't figure out, because it's one of those slow encroachers. Like when you first get down there, you don't feel anything. You feel great. Like when I first landed in Ecuador, I felt great. But that's sauerkraut, and that's beets, fermented beets, and the sprouts, and all kinds of things like that. Okay, and the next thing I'm going to move on to is having a free and clear home. It is so important to own property to be able to have a balanced life so that you can live the life that you were called for. Having a free and clear house is what we have. Now, we have here in America. Now, I'll tell you in a second what we paid for it. But before we moved to Ecuador over 13 years ago, I was talking to an American guy from Ecuador. There's people going down there and doing blogging at the time. And he was bragging about the $100,000 houses you can get in Ecuador. And so I did a little bit of calculation before we even left America. And I said to myself, well, people in Ecuador make $800 a month. That's household GDP back at that time. Now it's maybe a little bit higher. And I said to myself, how are Ecuadorians affording a $100,000 house? Even though that sounds really cheap from America, how are Ecuadorians paying for that? And I thought to myself, well, if I was an Ecuadorian, based on my $800 a month household GDP, I would have to be buying $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 houses. So I wrote to the man, and I said, well, what can you get for $30,000? And he never replied back. And that's the thing about expats and Americans that go to these places. They never really pay the going rate for real estate, whether it's rent or whether it's just home ownership. And here in America, I can pay whatever I want to pay. And we paid $6,000 for this house. and it needs a boatload of work, which is fine because I have time. Now, why are people so negative sometimes? I had a guy come on here and make a comment like, oh, you traded your retirement for a contracting job. No, I didn't. I barely spend a couple hours a day, only 3 days a week doing work on the house. I could easily spend way more time than that. I'm still recuperating from living in an endemic area for 13 years, and that's why I don't spend more time on it. But why do people have to be so negative? You know, the trolls, we have to, you know, they just come out of nowhere and they say negative things and then they leave. We don't need that. We need encouragement, and that's what I try to do in my videos. I try to encourage people that think they can't do things. And I'm saying that, you know, the house needs $16,000 worth of work, but you know what? That's okay. That's if I do all the work myself. And, you know, that means that for $25,000, I've got a house free and clear. I've got a great place, but it's got just the most amazing views in the world. I don't know why that always happens to me. Like when we went to Ecuador, we never asked to live on the river, but we got a $250 house that was rent per month, and it was right next to the river. When the expats were coming down, they're paying $700 to $1,000. I don't know why that happens to me. I always get these just amazing places for peanuts, and we're at it again. I've got this amazing place. It's a humble place. It's not very big. It's under 1,000 square feet. You know, it's 100 years old. It needs a tremendous amount of work. But again, you know, $6,000 got us in. $16,000 will get it up to par. And, you know, we've got a free and clear house, something that we could not do anywhere we've lived, in any of these places that have been promoted abroad. And, you know, you still see this to this day, even after 13 years, and I believe that you're going to keep seeing it. You know, videos coming out where the cheapest places for expats to retire in the world or to live in the world. And so I just wanted to present the other side of that story because, as usual, a lot of the information online is just very skewed just to make a point for certain people that have a vested interest and not necessarily have your best interests in mind. And so I hope I've encouraged you to have more of a can-do attitude and to see that things are possible and you can actually do better than going abroad to some foreign country where you're a fish out of water with everything and have absolutely no control over how much you're going to spend on anything. Bet you didn't know it was like that. Sorry to have to say it that way, but after 13 years living abroad and coming here, this is like being in heaven. And I should have titled this video, Happier Than a Billionaire in North America. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave us a comment below, and if you're a troll, we're going to delete you. Have a nice day.